awards. Help us win by voting at bestoflongisland.com.
Voice of Nassau Community College.
This is the award-winning 90.3 WHPC HD Garden City.
Listen on your smart speaker.
Play WHPC.
And available on Odyssey, TuneIn, iHeart, and on the WHPC app.
90.3 WHPC.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHBC, also streaming on nccradio.org. That's our website address where you can listen to us anywhere in the world. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. This program, guess what, is repeated on Sundays at 11 p.m. Sometimes we don't like things that repeat itself, but in this case, this program can be heard on at 11 p.m. as we say hello to Mike Panis. Unbelievable. He's up so early. He forgot to change his clock. So hi there. My name is Rabbi Pearl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you are listening or watching. Oy Gewalt, oy Gewalt. You can actually see us on Facebook Live at WHBC or at my own page at facebook.com, Anshul Pearl. So hello on the radio. Hello online. Hello to the world. And welcome to all those far and near. And those who are near are in Merrick, Long Island. Dr. Eitan Kalshevsky, welcome so much. Thank you. Not only are we physically, but also spiritually near as we all stand together during these very difficult times. So I'm told that we should live with the times. Obviously, we're not talking about the New York Times, but we're really talking about how our lives are connected to the Torah portion, the portion of each week. In the Jewish community, every Saturday, we conclude and we complete a complete section of the Torah. And each section, even though it has a geographical and has historical setting, nevertheless, the lessons of Torah, the lessons from the Bible, are with us each and every week and can be applied. That only when we see ourselves in the Torah, in it, around it, can we say we really have learned it, because that is really what the Torah is all about. As I mentioned to someone yesterday, that interesting, when a person looks for the perspective of life from the Torah, they get a full perspective from the beginning to the end. Many people living in fear and distress and confusion. But if you look at the Torah, you get a bigger picture from the beginning, the middle, and of course the ultimate good ending with the coming of Mashiach. So we get a good picture, and of course we don't lose any faith, but on the contrary, we strengthen our emunah and betochen, our faith and our trust. So I read in the Torah portion, I learned about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. I learned of how Lot is saved and how his wife turned into a pillar of salt. Her name was Lot, and that's why in Brooklyn there's a place called New Lot's Avenue. Did you know that? That's the reason why. So his wife turns into a pillar of salt. And I searched to see my life in these words. I mean, everything, as I said, has to have a meaning, personal meaning. So I was wondering to myself, what can I learn from the fact that Mrs. Lot was told not to look back as Sodom and Gomorrah was being destroyed, and she did, and she turned into a pillar of salt. Why not pepper? Why not gefilte fish? Why not a piece of cholent? You know, I mean, why salt? So I searched to see my life in these words, and I'd rather not see it, of course, as the connection is too intense, too real, and too true. You see, I'd rather pretend that this is merely a story, a lesson about a universal evil needing to be removed. So how can I relate to a pillar of salt? And yet I do, all too much. So this is the story. An evil community is destined to be destroyed. It is to be totally annihilated, and Abraham is foretold of the destruction. As we all know, he argues with God, begging him not to destroy the land and those who inhabit it. He begs that the people be spared in the merit of 50 righteous people. Yet he cannot find 50. He tries to find 45, 40, 30, 20, 10. Still he cannot. The city is utterly evil and is to be destroyed. It comes out that only Lot and his family are going to be saved. But there's one condition. Hello, there's one condition. Don't look back. But the temptation is too great. And Lot's wife looks, and she turns into a pillar of salt. So I, too, am often that pillar of salt. You see, stuck and hardened between where I never should have been and where I need to go. If only I could have the strength to let go. I try to reason, to rationalize why certain things are good for me. And even if they aren't good for me, they are good for someone, right? At least one person, right? Wrong. There's no good there. There's nothing to be redeemed. It must be destroyed. The relationship cannot exist. The only thing that can be saved is me. And only if I leave and don't look back. Never look back. Yet I can't help it. I take the first step away. I leave where I never should have been towards where I must go. If only I can make it there and leave this behind. Truly leave behind me what aims to bring me down and destroy me with it. If I can keep going, it will be gone forever. If I can let go, it will lose its power to hurt me. And yet, time and time again, I look back. And I'm once again as frozen as that pillar of salt. Something to think about. As I say good morning to everybody out there in the radio world, hello there. You can't see me, but I'm waving. And of course, those on Facebook certainly can see me. Thumbs up, everybody. Thumbs up. So I say hello to Peter Hershorn, to Jean Brandeston, Gina Marie, Zalman. Wow, Zalman Weg. Thank you so much, Zalman. And let's see, who else do we have here joining us? Karen Dunberg and everybody else. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I want to tell you a little bit about an event that took place last Shabbos. Last Shabbos, you know, we talk a lot about the insecurity on campuses and what's going on around the country. I would say that last Shabbos, 1,200 of the most important Jewish people gathered. It was called a pagisha. It's a Hebrew word which means encounter in Hebrew. Pagisha. What was going on? Chabad campus rabbis from every part of the United States, plus Canada, invited and joined their brightest and most enthused and unbelievable college students, and they all came together at Chabad Central in Brooklyn. This took place last weekend. Friday night, the Sabbath was brought in with song and with prayer. And there you can't imagine, as I mentioned, 1,200 young men and women from across the country, students on campus, came together. It was like seeing 1,200 flames dancing in circles, more power, more furious than the power turbines at Niagara Falls. If the IDF needed nuclear power, these 1,200 students were sending it to them. If you looked around and saw the hall filled with singing, with dancing of these young spirits, you knew you were standing in the vortex of the soul of the Jewish people. And that night, there were dinners hosted by all over Crown Heights with many hot-button discussions, as you can imagine. There were workshops, presentations, get-togethers, some all-nighters as well. My friends, let's appreciate it. And the reason why I'm sharing it with you, because these young men and women are living on hostile campuses with professors who attack everything they hold precious. With fellow students they thought were their friends until October the 7th showed up. Many of them feel the whole world has turned against them. And there was a speaker there who I know who had to make a presentation to these 1,200 students. And the person knew that he only had this one chance to speak to them. What would he say of words of inspiration to a gym filled with 1,000 college students? Here's what he said. First, he expressed that he was 19 years of age when he first met Abraham. What was he talking about? That he was flipping through the pages of Genesis for the first time at the age of 19, looking to see if there's anything in the Torah, in the book of Genesis, that might resonate with him. Oh man, the creation story was awesome. But hey, it seems that the Abraham narrative was not doing it for him. As we've been learning now, the arrival of Abraham, that is, until he got to the part where God informs Abraham about his plan to annihilate totally the wicked people of Sodom. Now, this is nuts, the speaker said. Can you imagine Abraham starts arguing with God? The same God that just created heaven and earth a few pages back. What does Abraham say? Hey, they can't all be bad. Come on. There's so many civilians over there. You're the official judge of the entire earth. And you're not going to judge things fairly? You're not allowed. So the speaker says, whoa, this is my dude. I identify with this totally. Because he figured this is not a standard character profile for religious heroes. Take, for example, Noah. Noah had no problems with whatever God planned to do. God tells Noah, hey, the people forget about it. People are bad. I'm going to have to reboot. I'm going to take out all the humans and the animals, and I'm going to just preserve one kernel from each species. What does Noah reply? Okay, boss. So what do you want from me? What do you want me to do? God says, hey, come on, baby. Build a big boat. Save your animals. Save it for your family, and save for some animals. So what does Noah do? He builds the boat. No argument. Hey, no problem. No problem, Noah says. And when Noah finally gets out of his boat at the end of the flood, he sees a desolation of planet Earth. He sat down on a rock and he cried. And he wasn't even in the Hard Rock Cafe. He said, God, oh merciful God, how could you have done this to your creatures? And a booming voice answered him from the heavens, you stupid shepherd. Where were your tears when I first came to you? You could have saved the world. So if you want to know what's cool about Abraham, this is number one. He takes ownership. He takes responsibility for the entire world and all the people in it, even if it means arguing with God. And we too, this is the speaker to the 1,200 students who had come specially for this weekend. He said to everybody, we are all Abraham. That was his first insight. But then there was a second insight. Do you know why he said this story of Abraham is his favorite? Here we have a recalcitrant 14-year-old in his father's home. His father is Terach. Terach was the Home Depot for manufacturing and marketing and selling idols for a living. His byline was, idols are us. So one day, Terach leaves Abraham in charge of the shop. He says, hey, whoever walks in, make sure he walks out with something. I'm not talking about shoplifting. I'm talking about going out with a sale. And don't forget to feed the idols at noon. Abraham doesn't make any sales. You know why? He just convinces his customers to worship the one creator of heaven and earth for free. Till it was time for lunch. So here's Abraham staring at his father's idols. There's a twinkle in his eye. He disappears into the workshop and comes out with a sledgehammer. And then he has the time of his life. He smashes to smithereens every idol in the store, all except for the largest one. He carefully places the sledgehammer in that idol's arm. Takes one large bowl, fills it with food, and places it in the idol's lap. At which point, the door opens, and in walks Terach, Abraham's father. Hey, he howls, what did you do to my idols? Abraham shoots back. Hey, there you go again. Dad, always blaming me. How about asking what I had to put up with? I was just trying to do my job, serving each one of a proportion of food for his or her size in the right size bowl. And they started fighting with each other. The little guy said he was big and he should get all the food of the idol next to him. And the big guy said the little guy got too much. Till the biggest one got fed up, no pun intended, with all of them and smashed them to pieces. And look for yourself. We caught him red-handed. To which Terach replies, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? Forget about it. They are all idols of wood and stone. They don't talk. They don't eat. They can't fight with each other. And Abraham answers back, so Dad, why do you worship them? Takeaway number 2, he continued to the students. Abraham doesn't just shatter idols. He shatters the narratives, the myths, the propaganda, the lies of his society, the narratives of his society. He understands these fads have nothing to do with the reason or with truth. They're all convenient lies for preserving the status quo, keeping dictators such as Nimrod in power, and making easy bucks off an ignorant populace. Does that sound familiar? He sees through the lies. He's willing to challenge authority and put everything online to rip it apart. Do you know when we were conceived, so to speak? We were conceived in the twinkle of an adolescent eye, just before he smashed the idols of his father's house. Every one of Abraham's descendants, who ever lived and will live, were conceived at that moment, which is, of course, you, me, and all of us. Because inside of us, continued this speaker, is that spark of Abraham. But we're not afraid to shatter idols. We question bogus narratives. We defy the lies, no matter how many educated and authoritative people believe in them. And there's one more detail about Abraham I didn't catch the first time around, he said to these wonderful young men and women, but it's crucial. God tells Abraham to get out of his hometown and go to an unidentified land where he's going to get rich and famous and have lots of kids. He goes there, and there's a famine, shoin. From that point on, everything goes wrong. If anybody wanted to prove to Abraham that there is no God, no worries. God was doing it for them. Tells him all kinds of, and look what he goes into, right into terrible times. But my friends, what kind of gene do you think we're carrying inside of us? How did Abraham deal with that after all that he had been promised and what he found when he came to this unidentified land, which eventually became known as Canaan, and of course Israel. Abraham didn't let circumstances define him. He knew what is real. He knew what is true. And he didn't budge. He didn't budge. I want to repeat that for myself. Abraham didn't let circumstances define him. He knew what was real. He knew what was true. And he didn't budge. So people didn't like such a guy, Abraham. They didn't like his beliefs. But my friends, Abraham wasn't fazed. He was above that. Each of us carry such genes. He ignored their animosity. He was friendly to everybody. He set up a tent to feed any passing stranger and talked to his fellow human beings about the truth, that there's only one God. He's for free, and he cares about the world that he made and the people inside it. Yes, my friends, Abraham was living in a hostile world, but Abraham had no fear. He chased after an army of 4 ruthless emperors when his principles demanded it. And this is what the speaker was presenting to these young men and women who had gathered in Crown Heights last weekend. We must remember, each and every one of us is like Abraham. Each and every one of us carries the genes of what makes us all who we are. Therefore, I share with you, my friends, today, be like Abraham. Don't let the world define you. Sure, there are people out there that don't like us too much. Don't let that define you. You are not who we are. We're not who we are because they want to destroy. We are who we are because every moment that we're alive, we are emissaries of light and hope and kindness and humanity to the entire world. Everything good about today's global civilization, we must remember we have impacted. The humanitarian values that are those who throw into our faces, guess where they all come from? Comes from us. The world as we know it could never become what it is without the indefatigable, undefeatable persistence of doing what is right, what is good, and what is true. And as he spoke to these young students, you will can do so. How do we do that? How are we emissaries of light? With mitzvahs, the instruments of light, with Torah, the bearer of wisdom, with courage and with chutzpah, like Abraham. So I share with you this morning, my friends, as much as our heart is filled with all kinds of stuff, please take ownership like Abraham. Please shatter the narrative like Abraham. Please, like Abraham, don't let hatred define who you are. Because we all know, has been proven time and time again, darkness will die and eternity will remain eternity for good. Let's say hello to Levana Lichter, Shalom Aleichem, to Cheryl Varen Kowarski, always with her beautiful remarks. Thank you so much. Let's see now, who else do we have? We have Dr. Kilshevsky with an amazing insight on the Torah portion. Laura May, unbelievable, who welcomes not only the viewers, but even myself. That's very kind of you, Laura. I had no choice. I had to show up here this morning. Allow me for a moment to share with you a question that came up. And I believe it was perhaps one of my good friends on Long Island who had this question. This person said, this man, shared with me that he had recently lost his wife of 60 years and missed her dearly. And this person wanted to know, are we going to be together in heaven? Obviously, I had not heard of his loss, so I extended my heartfelt best wishes of sympathy and blessings to be comforted. and sorry to hear about your loss. Can you imagine the difficulty of losing a soulmate after so many years together? To answer your question, yes, you'll be with your wife in heaven, but perhaps not in the way that you imagine. You see, oftentimes people imagine heaven as a place that looks pretty much like earth. We look the same, we do the same things, just in some mysterious different place. The truth is that heaven is a spiritual world. People don't sit in heaven and drink coffee, nothing personal, Kim, drink coffee together or play with their pets. My favorite engineer is sitting here drinking coffee over here. I mean, I'm sitting here working, sweating bullets, and then she's drinking. I mean, who said it's a man's world? Forget about it. So, what do you think? In heaven, we sit around drinking coffee and playing with pets? Oh, my goodness. Here we go. Oh, am I in trouble today? Heaven is a place where our bodily needs and desires simply don't exist, and our souls enjoy closeness to God. Having said that, there's much written in both the revealed text of the Torah, that's the Talmud, and the mystical text, as an example, the Zohar, about the soul connection between spouses that continues in the afterlife. The Zohar explains that husband and wife are two halves of a single soul, which is broken apart at the point of birth and reunites once again after passing. Now, how we experience our heavenly reward, known in Hebrew as Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, depends on our actions in the here and now. Accordingly, each half soul experiences the delights of the afterlife in different palaces, reflective of their accomplishments on earth. But even though the male and female souls study Torah separately during the day, at night the two halves reunite. The Talmud tells the following story that describes how a couple experiences their reward together in the world to come. Rabbi Hanina is the name, and his wife endured crushing poverty. At his wife's advice, Rabbi Hanina prayed for sustenance. Sure enough, a hand emerged from heaven and handed him a golden table leg. That night, Rabbi Hanina's wife saw in a dream how in the world to come the righteous were sitting and feasting on three-legged tables. But she and her husband had to make do with a wobbly table with but two legs. After some more discussion, the couple decided that Rabbi Hanina would pray that the table leg be taken back so that their reward in the afterlife be preserved for them. And this is what exactly happened. This allegorical rich story, obviously there are no tables or food in Gan Eden, has many lessons and much symbolism. But one thing is clear. Rabbi Hanina and his wife fully expected to experience the afterlife together. Then our conversation continued. What about second marriages? If a couple divorces, it's clear that they won't be together in the afterlife. A divorce separates not just their bodies, but also their souls. What if one spouse passes away and the other remarries? Who will be together in the afterlife? In the Kabbalists explain that the main soul connection exists between the primary spouses, which usually, but not always, but usually refers to the first marriage. Particularly, as I remember from my own learning as well, if they had children with the first spouse. There is a discussion among the mystics regarding which spouse a woman will be married to in the era of the resurrection of the dead. Would she be married to her first husband, or would she be picked up where she left off with her second husband? In the end, while there may be some differences, most say that the basic contours would apply and she'd be married to her primary first husband. But as the mystics put it, the details are the secrets of the heaven. And that, as Yogi Berra would say, it ain't over till it's over. They aren't fully revealed. So no one can know for sure until it happens. May it be speedily in our days. And with this, I'd like to share with you a fascinating insight. But it was, I guess, inspired by a question. A young couple, with God's help, next weekend, I look forward to officiating a marriage of a young couple. They're both from Israel, now live in New York. And they said to me, because all the guests have come in from Israel and etc., and she expressed something I think all of you may feel at this time. How can even the kala, even the bride, she said, I feel kind of guilty, with the joy, with what's going on in the land of Israel. And many people have that feeling. They can't feel at home. How can I take my trip or do what I'm planning in my house and changing and this? How should we feel? How should we feel? One answer I gave was the fact that joy for us is not a, what do they call it? A boat ride. Joy for us is not drinking, getting smashed. Joy and happiness in life is not running away to some distant island. These are all change of view, time out. But the real joy that we all have comes from our soul. As I mentioned, if you could put a scope into our soul and listen, or metaphorically drink in, so to speak, what would be oozing out of our souls, especially during these times, would be simcha. You say, Shiga, how can he talk about, how could that be? But if we recognize, appreciate the essence of our soul is connected to the eternal God, there can be nothing more happy than that. That's our true happiness. That true happiness comes from the sense of community, when we take time out and go to shul with community. It comes out when we have celebrating the birth of a child, a boy or a girl. In our shul this week we celebrated the birth of 3 baby boys, all in one weekend. Can you imagine? How do we balance that with a very serious speech I had to give about Israel? The answer is, if our happiness, if our joy is one of those superficial ones, an external one that brings from the outside in, you're right, put those aside. This is not a time to revving it up in pleasures of the world. But if it is a time to express the true joy of who we really are, then on the contrary, the greatest way to deal with challenges today is with that kind of essential, holy aspect of who we truly are, as I would like to share with you. In this Torah portion, we read about what is perhaps the first party recorded in history. Torah tells us Abraham throws a giant feast in honor of his son Isaac. And the people gathered to eat and to drink and to share Abraham's thanks to Hashem for the gift of life. And the sentence says, I will just share it with you in English, Vayegamal hayeled, the child grew and was weaned. And Abraham made Mishta Gadol, a great feast, on the day that Yitzchak was weaned. What was the party all about? The Medrash cites 3 opinions as to the nature of this weaning. Some say it was his bris. Some say it was when he's 24 months old, at the conclusion of his weaning. in terms of the mother was weaning him from feeding him, nursing him. Then we have a third opinion that says what they were celebrating was Isaac's bar mitzvah. So you thought the caterers made up this idea of a celebration at 13 or 12. No, Isaac. Abraham made a party on the bar mitzvah day of Yitzhak. That's the traditional celebration for a Jewish boy reaching the age of religious adulthood. But the Torah is not just simply saying that they celebrated, but says it was a great feast, a great Mishta Gadol. And the Medrash explains the Gadol, the big, great feast, was not how many, foods and how many choices at the smorgasbord. But the word great, Mishta Gadol, was in the sense that great personalities participated at this bar mitzvah. It was attended by the who's who of society of that time, the cream of the crop, heads of state, aristocrats, dignitaries, politicians, officials, and other important individuals, and many people who thought they were legends in their own mind. Everyone came to share in the joy of our forefather Abraham, who, as we all know, had launched a new spiritual movement and already conquered the four mighty kings, and by this time had established himself as a significant leader and personality in the region. So one can well imagine all the handshaking, the smiling, the informal deal-making, and the general shoulder-rubbing that took place at such a gathering of such important and distinguished people of the time. But it doesn't end there. One of the most notable attendees was a guy called Og, O-G. He was a famous giant and the king of Bashan. The Medrash tells us, Eitan, this is Medrash Rabbah, chapter 53, relates that at the sidelines of this big event, the following dialogue ensued between Og and his ilk. Og's entourage challenged this giant because he had previously predicted that Abraham would never have kids. An assertion that now had been clearly proven wrong. Here's a boy, he's 13 years of age. You said, and the Medrash puts it this way, did you not say that Abraham is a barren mule who cannot father children? He said to them, and now, what is this gift? This is Og speaking. He says, this kid is inferior, lowly, and I can squash this child with my finger. I can do barbaric acts against him. The Holy One, blessed be He, chimes in and says, hello, why are you mocking this gift? By your life, you will see tens of thousands of boys and girls who will be his descendants. And in the end, you will fall in their hands. As it states, Hashem said to Moshe, do not fear him, because Moses, years later, had a showdown with this very Og. And God says to him, do not fear, my friend, for I have placed him and his entire nation in your hands. And that's exactly what happened. When the people were on the other side of the Jordan, on their way to the Holy Land of Israel, Og tried to stop their advance. And Bashan was defeated. And their giant leader, King Og, was killed by Moshe himself. The history is intriguing and fascinating. But how is it relevant to our times today? The first question, especially according to the opinion that this was his bar mitzvah, if this is now 13 years after Isaac's birth, why would Og and his buddies still be talking about the event of Isaac's birth? It would be one thing if they were gathered at his bris, And Og came up with and said to him, Og's friends said to him, look, you said Abraham couldn't have any children, and now, look, he has a child. But if we're talking about his bar mitzvah, it's old news, baby. It's old news. Why are they still talking about it now? What would there be to talk about when the boy's 13 years of age? It's 13 years later. And if Og had such an animosity against this child, what did he come for? What was he there for? I mean, this is a simcha. Abraham invited the people to come and celebrate. If he wasn't interested in celebrating, sei gesund, get out of here. Stay home. Did he really have to come and start threatening the bar mitzvah boy? Obviously, there's more to the story than initially meets the eye. It's fascinating, my friends, because I take you now back to 1942, where I share with you an insight. The Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, was invited to a bar mitzvah. 1942. Hello, 1942. It was the Karnofsky family. The summer of 1942. These were dark and challenging days indeed for the Jewish people, as Hitler's trains in Europe brought millions of Jews to their cruel death in the gas chambers. We can well imagine the somber mood of world Jewry at that time, and what the bar mitzvah guests must have been feeling. How do you celebrate a bar mitzvah, becoming an adult amongst the Jewish people at a time when simply being Jewish was a terrifying prospect? At a time when some surely wondered what was so good about being Jewish in the first place, and were tortured by the thought of what guarantee there was that we would even be here in another generation or two. So at that bar mitzvah in New York, the Rebbe transcribed in his own diary, he asked this very question. A bar mitzvah means to enter the camp of the Jewish people, to accept the yoke of Torah mitzvahs, to celebrate with family and friends, where we can draw strength and fortitude for this. Where can we get strength, especially during these dire times when everybody found themselves in 1942 with hearts broken and forlorn? And the Rebbe proceeded to answer this question by explaining the background to the story of what was going on the side, a sidebar, so to speak, at Yitzchak's bar mitzvah. What was this debate between Og and his friends? And what was God's interjection into that conversation? In two words, is it might or right? The discussion between Og and his colleagues, the Rebbe explains, wasn't about physical superiority. Og wasn't simply boasting that he was a giant and Yitzchak was so small he could crush him with a finger. Rather, this was a globalist and existentialist debate about how nations and how ideologies can best develop and endure. Remember, gathered there that day were the rulers, the thinkers, the policymakers of their time. And like all leaders, they grappled with the following question. How do you get a people to survive? What must we give our youth for them to feel proud of their identity, secure in their beliefs, and remain true to the path that they have been shown by their parents? So in the mind of Og, a giant of a king and a king of giants, the answer was simple. Survival is the product of a sheer physical might. Og was a giant, a warrior, a lifetime of physical adventure, perhaps the sort of Gulliver and Superman both put together. He wasn't just a giant and a king. He had a fascinating history. The Medrash tells us that Og was around even before the Great Flood. That's 300 years before Abraham was born. How did he alone, except for Noah and his family, survive the flood? How did he survive? He was clinging tightly to the side of Noah's ark, even as the skies dumped torrential rain upon the earth for a half a year. Og was all about might, power, the survival of the fittest. And that's precisely the worldview that he espoused. To Og, it was obvious that what young people need to make it in life is bodily might, physical championships. We should inculcate in our children the spirit of sports, athletics, military discipline. Then the values of courage, valor, and physical achievements will fill them with confidence to last for a lifetime. So Og preached the survival of the fittest, and his belief that the only way a nation can survive in an ever-changing and modernizing world was to become more fit, to develop the mightiest army that would overcome any external forces. But Abraham represented, and as we've been learning today, Abraham is inside of every one of us. He represented a completely different approach. Abraham talked about faith in one God, about giving others and being kind, about respecting other people of other backgrounds, about taking the time to contemplate of how we got here, how we exist, and to search for the purpose and the meaning of it all. Abraham believed that while people may like to flex their muscles, that's not really what they're after. Abraham taught that people may look like creatures of the body, but what they really are, what they really aspire to be, is embodiments of the Spirit. What people want deep down is to give and elevate, to be loved and to be cherished, to live for a higher purpose, to be part of a whole far bigger than any sole individual could ever hope to be in a vacuum. Of course, Abraham believed in physically protecting oneself. Let's be honest about this. Abraham too understood to survive in the jungle of life, physical strength is given. Indeed, when Lot was kidnapped, Abraham didn't just stop and pray at the Western Wall. He marshaled an armed force and marched them to the victory, using strategy and tactics to devise a successful battle plan under the cover of darkness, exploiting the enemy's weaknesses and using the element of surprise, just like his descendants did thousands of years later, when they shocked the world by flying all the way to Uganda to bravely rescue their captive brothers and sisters, and as with God's blessing, we will do today. But as much as Abraham understood the value of might and understood how to harness it, he knew that ultimately physical might is only a tool, a keli, for survival. It isn't the survival itself. By no means does physical prowess represent the full range of a person's capability, nor can it even scratch the surface of a person's intimate need to find their true purpose and calling in life. Ultimately, the soul seeks something infinitely greater and truer than simply being strong and victorious in battle, or football, or any other experience pitting one force against the other. The question is, what does your might protect? What are we fighting for? If this is true of individuals, how much more so of nations? Who is the nation that survives the winds of change? Not the one who is merely strong, but the one whose strength is coupled with true faith. Only this kind of strength, bolstered and backed by the ingredient of divine eternity, becomes indestructible and unstoppable forever. So, at Yitzhak's bar mitzvah celebration, these two movements came to their inevitable showdown. Og's friends challenged him. Hey, Og, you always told us that Abraham cannot father children. Meaning, you always told us that Abraham's movement and its focus on spirit over matter has no future, God forbid. But here we are at Yitzhak's bar mitzvah. Against all odds, Abraham had a child, and behold, today he becomes a Jewish adult, steadfastly adhering to his father's path. Hello, what do you say to that? Og, who was no slouch, had a ready answer. Look how small Isaac is. Perhaps this focus on spirit over matter will work for a while when Isaac is young and still clings to his father's hands and his mother's apron. But when Isaac grows up and enters the real world, he's going to find out that his religious upbringing puts him at a serious disadvantage. And at that point, he'll be looking for self-realization of a very different kind. At this point, Hashem joins the conversation. By your life, he tells Og, you will see multitudes coming from this descendants, and in the end, you will fall in their hands. Hashem is the creator of all humankind, and is he who truly knows what makes the human being tick. After all, Hashem makes the human beings tick. On that day, he who creates, declared decisively that Abraham was right and Og was wrong. Might is mighty, but might alone is never mighty enough. Yes, one needs strength to live and survive, but just like an unbreakable safe is critical to protect a diamond, having a fantastic safe is wonderful, but what's the purpose of the safe is to protect the diamond. But isn't the diamond itself? Strength is only a means for protecting that which is important. Strength alone isn't and doesn't teach values. Strength alone isn't and doesn't require the virtues of kindness, the restraint, healthy boundaries, and respect for others as we see today. While physical strength can bring success, physical strength alone can also lead to unfettered competition, horrific violence, barbarism, war, and killing that ultimately destroys the weak and the powerful alike. Human beings seek meaning. Human beings seek meaning. A person is not an animal satisfied with eating and drinking and the fulfillment simply of its physical needs. A person is someone who asks not only what, when, and how, but also why. Why? A person craves to know, what's the purpose of this all? A person raises his eyes and searches for what is above and beyond him. A person needs to believe in something and to contribute to someone. When a person isn't given the opportunity to answer the question, why, he becomes his own worst enemy as he sinks into the tragic despair and the depression of utter emptiness. A nation whose identity revolves around its physical strength cannot maintain an identity for long. However strong it may be, somewhere down the line it will age and be challenged by a nation even stronger. And what happens then? The stronger party wins. The previous power becomes outdated, irrelevant, obsolete, as more modern forces come into force and take their place on the world stage. But as Hashem told Og and his contemporaries, Abraham's nation will not meet that sorry fate. Why? Because Abraham's survival plan isn't about physical strength alone, but about searching for meaning and depth in life and seeking the blessings of Hashem. And with that, we are truly eternal and unstoppable. So we fight differently. Og was to experience this important truth hundreds of years later when the Jewish people defeated him with precisely this sort of physical strength, coupled with the spiritual blessings from Hashem. On the one hand, Og's defeat at their hands wasn't purely miraculous, as was, say, the collapse of the walls of Jericho before Joshua. Moses didn't simply say Hashem's name, as we find out earlier on, as he began his leadership in Egypt. He let out Hashem's name and got rid of some people. Rather, Torah says very clearly that he was struck with a sword. The Gemara tells us that Moses, the great man of spirituality, leapt up into the air and struck Og's, struck him in his ankle, causing him to fall to the ground. In other words, there was an interplay of both the physical and spiritual forces. Physical ability, but imbued with divine providence. Divine providence manifesting it in a physical display of power. Therefore, while Og may have been physically superior, obviously he spent hundreds of years in the gym, it was the Jewish people who survived to this very day. And him and the like are in the dustbins of history. Indeed, as we speak this very moment, so many, this whole weekend and all these last few weeks, people have come to shul across the world, celebrating Shabbos, davening to Hashem, learning Torah, readying the festive Shabbos feasts for family and friends. If even one of Og's grandchildren exists anywhere on planet, please let me know. I'll give you my private number. Let me know what happened to Og and from his children. Obviously, you know the answer. Gornished. And that's what the Rebbe spoke about in 1942. He wrote them down as a fundamental lesson to all of us, where we live in a time where, yes, there's great physical strength, Baruch Hashem. We thank Hashem that gone are the days when there's persecution and we're forced to cower and hide. But today, with Hashem's help, we can proudly fight for our dignity and strength. And we can respond to the threats with force and with might and enjoy the technological and military advantages. But remember, these are all gifts from God. But even and especially now, when this fight goes on, we must remember that we are different. Our fight is not like others, and our victory is not like others. Our victory, ultimately, is a product, not only of force, but of divine fate. Despite being the smallest and the most persecuted of nations, we're the ones who survive. Thrive to tell the tale. Nations mighty and larger have tried to erase us, but it is they who are relegated to the monuments and to the pages of Wikipedia, while we still continue, still following in the ways of our forefather, Abraham. Because, let's be honest, there's something going on much bigger. It's not normal. And there's no reason to think of us. Why be ordinary when we're something deeper going on? And we've reached our position today by Hashem's kindness and blessings. And we must always remember and to continue to hold on to both of these ropes. The rope of prudent security, military planning on the one hand, and the rope of faith in Hashem and adherence to His Torah and mitzvahs on the other hand. We don't fight proportionately. We know Hashem is the commander-in-chief. We know who our vanguard is. Hashem holds us by our hands and guides us every step of the way. There's much more can be discussed, my friends. Beautiful and remarkable stories are coming out of the current events. But all I can say is, let's keep going. With Hashem's help, goodness and kindness will eventually come. We know the end of the story, as I said earlier on. When you read it from the Torah's perspective, you know the beginning of the story, you know the middle of the story, and we also know the good. And the world will come to a point where goodness and kindness and light will overcome darkness. And there will be no more tears and sadness and loss of life, but a world filled with goodness and kindness, with the redemption, with the coming of Mashiach.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Have a wonderful week.
The views expressed on air are not necessarily those of WHPC, its management, or Nassau Community College. Responsible opposing viewpoints will be considered by emailing them to whpc@ncc.edu or by mail at WHPC 1 Education Drive, Garden City, New York 11530. Thanks for listening to the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC.
This show on 90.3 WHPC is brought to you